Voters in West Virginia headed to the polls on Tuesday for the state's midterm primary elections in what could be another show of former President Trump's influence over the Republican Party. Now, redistricting has forced a face-off between two incumbent Republican congressmen, and they're vying for a single House seat. President Trump threw his weight behind Representative Alex Mooney for the nomination. But here's the interesting part. His challenger, Representative David McKinley, is backed by several state officials, including the governor. And McKinley is flaunting his vote for the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that gave money to the state for new roads and bridges. But with both candidates having a record of supporting the former president, it's raising some debate about what a Trump endorsement really means.
Is that Trump endorsement the silver bullet?
I would say so, absolutely.
Can't lose with it?
Well, you see my opponent, he's running as if he's more pro-Trump than me, which is not true.
Well, he says he is.
Yeah, that's what he says.
See, I've got a better voting record with Donald Trump than my opponent. When Donald Trump wanted support on the wall, I voted 4 times with him on that. When he wanted support for our veterans, I did. My opponent voted against all of those. So the people will...
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins me now for more. Hey there, Scott. So I know you were in West Virginia last week reporting on this. I loved your story on this, so I hope our viewers had a chance to check that out. But what kind of energy and attention is being placed on this primary today in West Virginia?
I think this is one of those local races with transcendent national impact, which is why we've drilled down into it so much, Caitlin. This is an early canary in the coal mine, in the West Virginia coal mine. You've got two incumbents running against each other in a primary. It's distinctive, it's not unprecedented. And you have former President Trump picking a side demonstratively, going all in on Alex Mooney, who, if you follow the history and traditions of West Virginia, would otherwise be an underdog because Dave McKinley, the 12-year veteran, the former architect and engineer, is running the West Virginia playbook as it's traditionally run. He's secured some bacon. He's gotten some federal projects that he can put his name on back for his home district. He voted for that infrastructure plan. He locked up all the local endorsements of note in his part of the district, which is Wheeling, and he's got the governor's endorsement. He's doing the things West Virginia politicians typically do to secure re-election. Alex Mooney has Donald Trump's endorsement and is a flamethrower against this infrastructure deal, which Congress passed with about a dozen Republican votes, and which would very well serve West Virginia, which still deals with pervasive poverty, crumbling roads, and crumbling bridges by the hundreds. So let's see what happens as the voting concludes tonight, as the results come in, as you have what could be a precursor to other races between now and Election Day.
Yeah, Scott, that's the most fascinating thing, I think, about this race. I mean, it used to be that if you were able to come back to your constituents and say, hey, I got a lot of money for roads and bridges and to fix a lot of the infrastructure here that's badly needed, that could be, you would think that would be a win. But your reporting, shows that the infrastructure vote is one of the wedge issues in this race, with McKinley having voted for it and Mooney voting against it. But what are some of the other dividing lines in this race and possibly in other primaries across the country within the Republican Party? In other words, what should we be looking at here to learn more about the state of the Republican Party so far?
This is why I find primaries the most fascinating to cover, because you have to look for daylight in places you wouldn't otherwise find daylight. In a general election, one party against each other, there's all kinds of dividing lines, and some of them are predictable. In this case, one of the other fractures between these two incumbent Republican congressmen is that David McKinley voted in favor of an independent commission, bipartisan commission to investigate January 6th. Alex Mooney opposed it. We're not talking about the select committee that was appointed mostly of Democrats and a couple of Republicans. McKinley supported the bipartisan commission, and Alex Mooney has campaigned against that. Alex Mooney has called what happened January 6th a protest and characterized it as a few people who decided to go inside the Capitol. Dave McKinley has said unequivocally it was a big American moment, a tragedy, and that an investigation is warranted into what gave rise to it. So there's an issue with daylight. That will manifest itself elsewhere in the country. Those who took votes in support of the bipartisan commission, those who've called January 6th an attack on the Congress, and those who support an investigation of the insurrection have left an opening to primary challengers, whether they be incumbents or be tried and true challengers. Again, another reason this race is so fascinating. It gives you a roadmap, Caitlin, as to where other primaries could head.
Yeah, and especially with redistricting, these primaries are really where the contests are in a lot of these states. So that's so important to point out what you just said. We'll get a lot of answers to some of these questions we've had. West Virginia is such a fascinating state politically. I mean, in your piece over the weekend, you referenced JFK, campaigning in West Virginia. You can't really imagine a Democrat running for president spending time in West Virginia now. Democrats used to be, prolific around the state, and they have since dwindled in their numbers there. I'm interested, what has been the shift in West Virginia in the past few years politically?
It's been a rapid and accelerating shift, Caitlin, and you can look just at the states that touch West Virginia for other examples. But not only did Democrats used to rule West Virginia, they were the lions of the U.S. Senate. Robert C. Byrd, Jay Rockefeller, and there still is, oh, by the way, a Democrat in the Senate from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. But the realignment is quite something in the Mountain State. It's accelerated since the turn of the century. There used to be a Democratic House member about a decade ago, lost in the 2010 wave, in fact, lost in a primary ahead of the 2010 wave, and there have been no Democrats in the U.S. House there since. But look at the states that adjoin West Virginia. Pennsylvania, Ohio. Ohio's realignment has become clear over the last few years, where it's becoming somewhat out of reach for Democrats on a statewide level. And Western Pennsylvania, that border, Caitlin, between Ohio and Pennsylvania, which used to give rise to blue-collar Democrats, gave rise to Tim Ryan, who's now an Ohio Senate candidate. If you look at the 2020 maps, just a red wall along that state line. It's part of the realignment in the Rust Belt in the Midwest. The Democrats have to offset elsewhere, be it Georgia or Arizona, because it seems stubborn and it seems fixed for the near future.
So fascinating, and that's why, Senator Manchin has become something of a household name. And even though he's getting a lot of hits from Democrats for not doing what they want him to do, it'd be very hard to see another Democrat able to win in that Senate race. But Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much for sharing your reporting. We're glad that you went down to West Virginia to capture all of this for us, and we'll keep an eye on the results.
Thank you, Caitlin.